Hello, everyone. My name is Mark James. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Medi-Share. Welcome to Sharing Hope, Personal Finance segment. I'm thrilled to have Chuck Bentley here with me today. Chuck is the CEO of Crown Financial, and he also is an author of his most recent book, Money Problems, Marriage Solutions. And finally, you may have heard Chuck on the radio. He's on over 1,000 Christian radio stations, both music and talk across the country. So it's my pleasure to welcome Chuck Bentley to Sharing Hope. Chuck?
Hey, Mark, thanks for having me. You and I have had a growing friendship, and I certainly appreciate your ministry. We recommend it to so many people, and I think this is a great idea to help people for such time as this. So thanks for allowing me to be your guest.
Well, you're certainly welcome, and we appreciate you taking the time. As you know, with Sharing Hope, our goal is to bring experts like you to the table so that we can help our members and non-members around the country just in this moment of time. So I know recently you put together 7 steps, very focused, very practical in the wake of COVID-19. And Chuck?
Well, thank you, Mark. I called my children together when I saw the crisis unfolding. I wanted to talk to them and just be sure that they were taking it seriously. And then I called my staff together. And I don't usually talk to them about their personal finances directly. But I said, I've come up with some ideas that I think I better share with you. So this was for my children and for our staff. And I just called it the 7 steps we need to be thinking about right now. I'm going to just jump into them one at a time. The first was to cut back your expenses by 25%. And that sounds radical to many people, and there are probably some folks rolling their eyes right now. But look, what's going to be radical, Mark, is the economic decline in the second quarter of the year. It's going to be like nothing we've ever seen. Unemployment rates are off the charts already, literally off the charts. They're almost vertical. We're seeing a great deal of uncertainty about the future. So if the market's going to decline 20, 25%, I think our spending better decline 20, 25%. And I'm saying that for the next 90 days, not forever. Right. I'm not asking people to be a monk or a hermit or a miser, but just put the brakes on spending. If you have a big project you were about to undertake, which we were planning on a project this summer, I think it should be off right now. I think, if you're driving a race car, you let off the gas and you seldom hit the brakes, but I'm saying do both. Right. Let off the gas and hit the brakes. So save 25%. That's step 1 for the next 90 days. Stop your spending. Cut your spending by 25%.
So Chuck, that makes sense. And I was glad to hear you say that sounds like a lot. I think it does. However, I'm sure from your radio show and just the number of conversations you have across the country, would there be, everybody's different, but would there be 1 or 2 things you might suggest of areas to focus on to help people get there?
Yeah, our entire staff pulled together a list of things they were doing, and they submitted it to me and said, okay, we're taking this seriously. And it's a wonderful list. We can make that available to your audience, Mark. But just in general, you have fixed expenses and you have variable expenses, and you can't change your fixed expenses. You're not going to cut back on your mortgage 25% next month. You've got to pay that. But all the variable expenses, things like food, set a budget for your food and really cut back there. Obviously, we can't eat out anyway, so that saves us right off the bat. Entertainment is curtailed dramatically, so that is a big part of our budget. I would say also in any of the things that would fall into your miscellaneous category, like subscriptions, go through your regular monthly billings and see, are you paying for Spotify that you don't need for 90 days? Are you paying for cable TV that you could cut back on? Look at your insurance premiums. Look at things that you maybe you can, you've got a medical bill that, you need to talk to your doctor about right now, or postpone something that's elective for this next 90 days. That's more your area, Mark, and I don't want to get into what you're advising people about their health. But there's a lot of things that you can just push out into the future. And so we're recommending that people do that as step number one. Put the brake on.
Well, that's great. I think those are practical. I noticed you didn't mention canceling the Netflix subscription. Was that on purpose, or?
Well, I don't have Netflix, Mark. I always forget about it. I understand that they're having a record, number of downloads right now, and it's even getting slow. My kids tell me because there's so many people doing that.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, that's a great first step. How about number 2?
Number 2 is to save as much as quickly as possible. If you went into this unprepared, then you really do need to get a savings plan now. You need at least $1,000 in your emergency savings account. We recommend 3 months for sort of the threshold to try to achieve of your monthly expenses. And there's a lot of ways to begin doing that. If you're getting a tax refund, that's one way to put that money aside. And then the stimulus check is also going to be coming. So some people in the month of April are going to get more money than maybe they ever expected if they're getting a tax refund and a stimulus check. So if you don't have an emergency savings account, use the stimulus check to get one, because this is not a time to be living close to the financial cliff, close to the edge. You need to back off the cliff by having financial margin. And margin is that gap between what you're spending and what your income is and your outgo is. And if that gap is comfortable, then you can save more money right now.
Yeah, that's great. On the the stimulus check, or even back to number 1, saving 25%. I assume that you get the stimulus check, you're working towards number 1. Those obviously go hand in hand. And Chuck, what do you say to people that I'm sure there are some folks out there in this situation that say, man, wow, that's hard for me to cut, the 25. And when that stimulus check comes, that's just sort of keeping me afloat right now because COVID-19 hit so suddenly. Any, just baby step or perspective? I know you've mentioned some of that, but anything you could emphasize?
Well, I would say everybody has different circumstances, and there's no one plan that fits everybody's situation. So I want to be compassionate about that. There are people, if you just divide it into 2 categories, industries hard hit and industries unaffected. And those that are hard hit, that stimulus check may be a lifeline. And by all means, use it for its intended purposes. Keep the, food, clothing, and shelter. You got to pay for, you got to feed yourself, you got to have something to wear, and you got to have a place to live.
Absolutely.
So take care of the basics. And I'm assuming that those are taken care of and you're not in a crisis. Now, if you are in a crisis, then the packages available through the government are very healthy right now. Your unemployment benefits are not only extended from 6 months to 10 months, but they're also adding a $600 a month extra payment just to try to stem the pain for people who've lost their jobs. And we'll talk about replacing your income a little bit later on. But yes, let's be compassionate for those who are hard hit. It's a great point, Mark.
Great. And that's great advice, Chuck. So number 3, this one might, given number 1 and 2, number 3 may be like, really? What? So talk to us about number 3, Chuck.
I think a crisis is when the church separates itself, meaning the church universal, separates itself from the world. Our natural tendency is to hoard, which is obviously necessary if you went into this unprepared. But once you get the basics met, it's actually a time to give sacrificially. So step number 3 is to consider being sacrificial in your giving. And that means that it's going to be noticeable to you. It's going to feel different. Right now, the church is in great need. They're delivering meals to people who are shut in. They're distributing masks. They're doing drive-through testing. The church has a great need. And I'm getting various reports, Mark. It depends on whether the church is technologically savvy, whether or not they're healthy and whole right now. If they're able to stream their services and have online giving, most of them are still healthy. But some of the more traditional churches are not. And that's probably half of the churches in America. And so what I want to see is that the church rises up and we become strong and we set ourselves apart. If this were a fire, a tornado, a flood, a tsunami, an earthquake, we would see the damage and we would be out there. But we need to recognize this major damage to families, not only affected by the virus, but economically. And we need to look for places to give. There are key ministries that are helping people right now. And there are also things that are maybe you haven't thought about doing with your neighbors. We developed a neighborhood Facebook page, a private page, and we're talking to each other. And it's fantastic. If anybody needs something, we're helping. We're delivering meals to one of the widows. We're doing all sorts of things just for our neighbors that we haven't done in the past.
That's great. That's great. And I love what you shared about your neighborhood and the Facebook page. And certainly, I understand be generous with finances. And again, we have people in all different stages of how they navigate COVID-19. So I love the fact that not only is it financial, but we may have folks viewing this conversation right now that are saying, man, I want to be generous, but the only thing I have is my time, or maybe some things in my home that I could give away or help people with. Or, Chuck, would it be as simple as being generous with your time and reaching out to loved ones or friends or a conversation? Does that fit into your number 3 bucket?
Well, I'm thinking specifically when I talk to my children and staff about the stimulus check, that there are people that are largely unaffected by this, particularly economically. So their jobs are continuing, or maybe they're even doing better than before. If you're in the grocery business or the logistic business, or if you're, helping people set up technology right now, you're quite busy.
Right.
So if you get a stimulus check and you don't need it, consider giving it. Ann and I have already made the decision that what comes to our home will be given away immediately. And we've identified some people that we know that are hard hit that we're going to surprise with those funds. And we're looking forward to that. But there are also other ways to be generous. And I like what you said, Mark. We've had 2 families, one on our board and one on our staff, whose family members have been impacted by the disease. They've had the virus. One of them was an elderly person who was shut in. And we're seeing people do these drive-bys and, deliver balloons to the front yard, and a lot of innovative things that are showing love and bringing hope. And that's really what I think we need to see the church doing, is using whatever we can to do the things that we wouldn't have done in the past. We had a big windstorm in the middle of this, Mark, and it blew down 6 trees in our neighborhood. And we couldn't even get in and out. And one of the trees went down on a neighbor's house, and she's recently widowed. And as we were standing there in the front yard, or in the street in her front yard, we said, we need to take the tree down. And then all the guys said, no, not we, but somebody needs to. So we just hired a tree company, and we paid the bill. And it was $1,400 to get the tree off of her house. And there were 4 of us that divided that up and said, we love you and you don't have to worry about those things. So that was a form of generosity, even right here in our neighborhood.
I love that. Those are great practical suggestions, and it's amazing how we can be generous. So I appreciate that tag on there. So that leads us to number 4.
Well, number 4 is to advise your children to change their financial habits.
I'm interested.
Well, I've got children of all ages. My youngest is 19, and he's pretty savvy when it comes to spending money. And I sat him down and I said, look, the world is totally different than the one that you've been expecting. It's going to be a challenge for you to get a summer job. It's going to be a challenge for you to put aside money. It's not going to be easy as it used to be. And I want you to really get serious about your financial future, because you haven't been that serious about it. And I teach all my children to budget, and they actually do it pretty well. They have to allocate their resources from the time they're born till they get out of my home and free to do with money what they want to do. So they've all been trained to do it. But I started to talk to them about things like their phone plan. If you've got this high expensive unlimited phone plan, and you're doing it just for social media or streaming movies or stuff that you don't really need to be spending your time on. Let's get real about it, and let's start thinking about how you're going to view the future with your own money as you begin to become an adult. And the truth is, reality is hit. The younger generation is going to experience pain and suffering and challenges like they haven't had. And I'm saying that from the economic standpoint. They've never had to be shut in. I haven't had to be shut in, but they've never had to control their expenses in a way that, because their future is more uncertain than ever before. And so we gave them that talk. We gave them our advice, and we're very happy that they've received that well. And coming from me particularly, they know if I set them down and say, look, it's time to do something different, I'm pretty serious about it. And I would recommend a family meeting. Just get with your children, get with the kids and say, it's not going to be the same way as it used to be. Let's get serious about being much more conservative, much wiser with what resources you do have.
That's great. So I hear awareness.
And budgeting. Yeah.
And budgeting. So I appreciate that direction. I think that's an area for all of us as a parent. You want your child to take on those habits, and sometimes it's do as I say, not as I do. But we're hopeful we're emulating it, and I know in your household you do. So I think that's great leadership. How about number 5? This is something that unfortunately millions of Americans are facing right now, which is a loss of the job. And so they've been listening to this. Hopefully they're still tuning in because they're going, man, I'd love to be generous. I'd love to do all these things, Chuck, but I lost my job. But you've addressed some of that, but go ahead and talk to us about number 5.
Well, what I said in number 5, and this, of course, is advice to those closest to me. I said, in a crisis, sometimes it's your greatest opportunity to be innovative. Necessity will drive you to do things maybe you've never done before. I just sketched down a little bit of a list of things that I see people doing right now that have lost their job. Starting a delivery service. I see people providing delivery of things between houses, where some people don't want to get out, and you can call a number and a guy is it's almost like an Uber for packages, but it's just an independent service. He's delivering balloons. He's delivering greetings to elderly. Just be kind of innovative. And I think it's just great because he's doing something that meets a market need. These party companies have popped up. I don't know if you're noticing, but a lot of balloons and big yard signs are being placed in people's yard because they can't go out and have their party. Mm-hmm. And those are all over our neighborhood right now. Somebody has started a business doing that and being really, really creative. Another need right now is educating the elderly on technology. What is FaceTime? What is a Zoom? How do you get on Skype? Teaching people how to do that, there's a demand. And there's a lot of thought that this is going to be more normal for the future, and they have to get up to speed. The chairman of our board told me he's been a holdout. He doesn't even know how to turn on his iPad. And he said, I can't get away with that anymore. I've got to have somebody show me how to use technology. And I think that's an opportunity. I think helping people to get fit at home, we may lose our gym memberships. We may not be able to do the workouts that we used to do. You're a fit guy. Your ministry is helping people to be fit, but maybe providing custom instructions over the internet or showing you what you can do without being at a gym. Those are just some of the things that are happening already. People in logistics are in high demand. People in healthcare are overworked right now. People stocking groceries. The reason I brought that up is one of the people that walks in front of our house, they've stopped and talked to us, from the proper distance the other day. And I asked the boy who was 19, do you have a summer job? And he said, yeah, the local grocery store's got me working long hours at nights, restocking the shelves. He said, I'm really, really busy doing this. So there are opportunities if you've lost your job.
That's awesome. I this weekend saw someone driving around in our neighborhood in an Easter bunny costume, and the draw of the kids, let's just say Pied Piper, was coming to mind. So those are great practical suggestions. One quick info tip for those viewing this segment with Chuck. He mentioned health and wellness. We at Medi-Share, we have a personal fitness instructor that will be posting at-home workouts that you can do on a daily basis. So go to the health and wellness section of Sharing Hope. And as he said, there's ways to do that. So that's awesome. Thank you. So that brings us to number 6.
Number 6 is invite God into your financial situation, whatever your circumstances may be. And I know that sounds obvious, but oftentimes we think that worrying is actually inviting God into our situation, but we haven't proactively said, Lord, I really need your help. I need you to rescue me from these circumstances and to show me the right way to go. And I could go on and on, Mark. I'd like to tell you just a couple of stories. A number of years ago, a widow was listening to the radio in her car. She heard me on the radio. And I said that the easiest way to get out of debt is to learn to save. And I think she must have rolled her eyes. Her situation was, she was 70. Her husband had died. They had $50,000 of consumer debt. She had never worked, and she couldn't pay the debt back. And she stopped her car and prayed, Lord, I've never needed you more in my life than right now. I need you. And he said that to ask you to help. And I don't know where to go to work. I don't know how to save. I don't know how to pay this back. I'm alone, and I really need you to help me. She got a job at a big box store at age 70, wore one of those orange aprons full of all the buttons, that they wear at the checkout counter. And she saved $50 of her paycheck the first month. She saved $50 the second month. She saved $50 the third month. And she kept doing this and kept working. And when I got a card from her, it was with a picture of this beautiful woman, about 75 years old at the time, sitting at a wedding with one of her grandchildren. And all of her children, all of her grandchildren, all of her great-grandchildren were there. And she said, Chuck, I am now debt-free. And I did what you said. I asked God to help me. And in 5 years, I paid back all the debt. But it didn't just change my life. It changed everybody's life in this picture. Because now our family sees what God can do with a helpless widow. And it's one of my favorite stories. Her name is Joan Cristalaw. She was in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Wow.
And
that's awesome.
And so people who are listening, who are in a situation where they're afraid, Mark, they're worried, they're stressed, maybe there's tension at home, ask God to help. Ask God to show you the way. And I've seen it over and over and over. It's just simply praying and saying, Lord, I need you because this is bigger than I can handle. And he will help.
I love that. I think, in this moment, Chuck, everyone has some level of fear because there's uncertainty, and it's okay to have fear, but it's where we place our trust and hope. And I love the story. I appreciate you sharing that. That's awesome.
Well, just a quick point that when the Lord told Joshua to be strong and courageous, it was because it was so fearful. I mean, you don't get those instructions unless it is really scary. And courage is being able to take action when it is scary. Absolutely. And it is scary. It is uncertain.
It is scary. It is uncertain. I agree. That's great. Thank you. Well, we've been through 6, and so your final point, I think, is really instructive and hopefully helpful if people have found this conversation of value, which I think many will. Why don't you talk to us about number 7?
Well, number 7 is to know and apply God's financial principles going forward. If you go into this circumstance and you find yourself unprepared or having difficulty navigating it, I found that God's timeless principles prepare you whether it's good times or bad times. And when I think about what we really need in our country, people think that, we need, you can get political, you can start talking about the virus, you can talk about all sorts of issues to help our country going forward. But I truly believe at the grassroots level, if God's people will apply God's financial principles, we will be those whose financial house is built on the rock. And when the next storm comes, we won't be shaken, and we will be prepared to help other people. That's when we stand out the most. We show that we've been wise, we've had the discipline that it takes to manage our finances different than the world. We haven't been foolish, we haven't been caught off guard, and we're ready for what may come. And the reason I'm saying that, Mark, is I don't believe that this is the end of the crises. We had one in 08 and 09, here we are again, and I think we're going to have a series of these in the future, and possibly coming faster than they've been coming. And we need to be distinctive and different. And of course, this is what I've given my life to teach people, Mark, is that it's not just doing finances right. It's not doing it the way American Express might teach you, or some, financial pro. It's doing what God said to do. And what God said to do, starting with, the great famine in Egypt, all the way through the New Testament, he gave us his advice on what's best for us. And if we will do that, and by the way, this is where I said to my children, you can choose to watch Netflix and binge on Netflix while you're locked in, or you can choose to invest in your future. And what you sow today, you will reap in the future. And if you will learn God's principles now, you will reap the reward and the blessing of those, no matter what crisis comes next.
Sage advice. I have nothing to add to that. I think well said. And Chuck, I know this segment, 7 steps, so good. I think just very practical direction. I'd even call it guardrails. I think everyone's looking for, some way to get better footing in the world around us. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. We'll also have a link not only to the PDF, the 7 steps PDF, but also we'll have a link to just Crown online resources. Is there anything you want to share about, maybe a couple additional resources you're finding particularly helpful right now?
Yeah, Mark, thank you so much. And let me just say thank you for having me today and for your willingness to help your people this way. I think it's so very important for all of us to be this proactive. But we developed just a special landing page called crown.org/coronavirus. We have things like a free crisis budget, how to adjust your finances if there's maybe a 2-income household and one of you has lost your job, what to do if you're facing extended unemployment, if your industry's been wiped out. A lot of free resources there. The Money Dates program is available there that we talked about, Mark. In fact, because of your advice, I took 4 of those dates and I made them free just for today. So that people,
fantastic.
So people could go, and there's 4 dates. You may not leave the house, but you can make a meal, and you work through 4 important discussions on your finances as a husband and wife. And I think it's, there's 10 of those dates, but we picked 4 of them just for this particular time to make them available. And thank you for that idea.
Thanks again for joining us, and everyone out there, have a wonderful day, and blessings to you and your family. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mark.